but I will tell you a little bit about why they're here, why we wanted them here. Me, myself, so I work for a startup in San Francisco called Rev.com. I've always felt, like many of you probably, like I don't understand my users as much as I want to. I can never get enough. I talk to them weekly on the phone or user testing of some sort. I have weekly connection of some kind. That's like a personal goal ongoing, and that's great. That works well for me. But it's never enough for me, and I don't know how many of you feel that way. But I feel like I don't have enough empathy. I studied anthropology, so for me, understanding people is key. And so FullStory is a tool that I got turned on to with my product team at Rev as another way to understand user behavior when we're not there with them. For those of you who don't know what story, basically, and these guys will explain it better than me because that's their job to explain it. But it allows you to observe your users. And so the reason we wanted them out here is twofold. One, they're a great product team, and we can learn from them. But two is that they have built a tool specifically for understanding users and have a lot of insights there. So we're stoked to have them. We've got Bruce, Jacqueline, and Josh. Joel, unfortunately, wasn't able to come due to family issues that propped up. So we're bummed about that, but we are stoked to have these guys here. So if you wouldn't mind, let's just give them a quick thanks, clap. And I'll let you guys take it away.
Check. All right, good. So I'm Bruce. Jacqueline and Josh are here with me from FullStory, as he said, and thank you for inviting us. It's been really fun to prep for this and talk through it. I'm one of the founders and COO, so as a consequence, I tend to work in a lot of different departments. So I'm tempted to talk a lot about FullStory. We'll talk about it a little bit. I'll restrain my urge to evangelize, but we're going to talk about culture really instead, and I think that as we do talk about the product, you'll see how we think our culture affects the product and the results. A lot of us worked together for years at Google before starting FullStory, and one of the slogans that was tossed around there is culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know if you've heard this, but we took that really, really seriously, and Google had a very strong culture, and at FullStory we knew from day one we wanted to do that too. And it's not to say strategy is unimportant, it clearly is, but if your goal is to build amazing products that people absolutely love and have a dynamic, resilient team that loves working with each other and building a robust long-term company, then your strategy will evolve and change, and you can update it as you get smarter and you learn from customers and competitive landscape changes. So strategy evolves, but culture has a huge amount of momentum and a huge effect on your product and the customer experience that you end up delivering. So that's why we, from the very beginning, really focused on culture, and that's most of what you'll hear today and that we tend to talk about is actually the culture and the implication of how that affects the product. So a quick anecdote that kind of highlights how we think about it is one of our investors is Google Ventures, and they have a little workshopping group that will come to you and talk you through this why, how, what exercise. Are you familiar with this? There's a TED Talk from Simon Sinek that says, don't just think about what you're doing, think about why you're doing it. And the whole point was that most companies don't really think about the why, not their mission. They just say, this is what we sell. So I'm kind of awkwardly proud that we had the inverted problem. We had the problem, I'll show you, we know exactly why we're doing what we're doing, which is the words became, everyone benefits from a more perfect online experience. And I mean, that sounds trite, but actually software mostly sucks. That's why we're here at conferences, and that's why we struggle every week to kind of make things better, and how do we get people to want things to be better, and so on. Call us idealistic, but we just think software should be perfect in every way for every person. So that's the point, right? It's not improving human lives if it's not actually, easy to use, easy to understand, and effective in practice. So that's why we get out of bed in the morning, is to actually try to help make software better for everybody, including us as end users. The how, we also actually found pretty easy. The GV ladies said, you can't really call empathy a competitive differentiator. So she kept steering us away from this idea of empathy. But for us, it's all about empathy. You can have all the data you want, but unless you can drive empathy within your own teams to get changes made, you won't really improve anything, or not fast. So our words are, by inspiring everyone in your company to empathize with your customers, solve problems, and definitively answer questions. So again, charts, that's great. You can get all this data, but unless you look at the data, unless you do something that makes you want to go do something differently, then nothing really changes, nothing improves. Now, if our goal, which it is to improve customer experience and products by getting everybody across the company to try to work together, not have all these silos that I think all of you feel the pain of, support is over here, marketing is over there, PM is over there, and the customer experience, the best products come, you align all those things together. So driving empathy and driving cross-functional collaboration is huge. But that's hard to put that into a what statement. So what is FullStory as a product? The best we came up with, and we struggled, honestly, is a customer experience platform. Kind of just made that concept up. That provides everyone in your company with pixel-perfect playback. That's the empathy thing. Robust search and segmentation, so you can investigate hypotheses as they come up, and proactive insights. Okay, so that's the what, but the what will evolve over time, absolutely. So that's why the culture is so important, so that we can continue to evolve the what. Okay, a couple of screenshots to frame what Jacqueline and Josh will be talking about. This is an example of a playback screen within FullStory. What you see here in the middle is exactly what the end user saw and experienced. So when you press play, the timeline starts going like a DVR, sort of. And you'll see the mouse move, you'll see scrolling, you'll see hesitation, you'll see confusion, you'll see things that get clicked on that you never expected somebody would want to click on, and so on. And it really becomes clear. So if you gain some insights that way, it really drives empathy. You want to share that with other people in your company. You can make notes and share it. And then if you develop a hypothesis, hey, I wonder if this is happening a lot, or maybe that's just an isolated case. You can ask the question at scale across everything that happened on your site, all the user experiences. So we emphasize search a lot. And the last thing I'll mention is, our culture of empathy, how does that manifest in the product? I think a lot of ways, in particular, in the little nuanced ways that you don't really plan. Of course, when you search, you want to look for things like clicked on this, visited page that. But it's all about human experience, right? So you can do search for rage clicks in FullStory. And this really happens. Users get frustrated and they bang on a particular element or a button that's not working correctly, or they're confused. Error clicks, which is when you click on something and then a JavaScript console error pops up. You can search for those experiences. And so bringing the emotional aspects to your consideration of how people are using your product is something we want to directly turn into a product. And that's kind of how we think about it, and that flows directly from our culture. So with that, we'll go peel back a layer of the onion and go to Josh, who leads design for the product.
Hello, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Josh. I help head up the design efforts at FullStory. I just want to quickly say I'm very happy to be here in Utah. I've never been. We're from Atlanta. We think we're pretty friendly, but you guys are way friendlier. It's kind of freaking me out a little bit, so well done.
Nobody even shot at us.
Nobody's shot us. Yeah, that's true. So we feel very safe. Thank you. Anyway, I've got 3 things I want to share just ever so briefly. Where's my clicker? There we go. Yeah, we'll get to this one in a second. I want to talk about how we make decisions at FullStory, or at least 2 tools that we use to do that. There's probably many others that we could talk about. I want to talk about 2 foundational ones. I want to talk about ideas. Where do ideas come from? How do they evolve over time? How do they mature? What do you do with ideas? And lastly, I'll give you a little picture as to how the first 2 things kind of relate to each other in practice. So this first one is we've become to realize there's really 2 modes in decision making. Think of them almost as Zoom levels. At a high level, you're going to want aggregates. You're going to want data, the kind of stuff that we are inundated with, the kind of stuff that we take for granted. High level trends, charts, graphs. But at the same time, we're going to also want individual stories. You want to be able to look at the humans that comprise those aggregates. A simple way to think about it is this, just aggregates and anecdotes. We actually heard some of the other folks that spoke today about, quantitative data, qualitative data. We are still, I think, in our infancy when it comes to qualitative data as an industry. We've got a lot of quantitative stuff, but we're not there yet with that. And so I think what we really care about is creating a tool that allows you to fluidly move between those two modes. And that's actually become a core design principle that we work from in designing features, not only from process-wise, how can we design this feature? We look at people and understand how they're using it, but also we want to put that into the product and empower our customers to do the exact same thing. So how does this play out in practice? Well, I think most of us in this room, we're used to sitting with users, maybe in a coffee shop, and saying, hey, look at this phone, try this thing out, try this app out, tell me what you think of it. Or maybe we work in more formal settings like a usability lab. And in those settings, we may have a series of tasks that we want somebody to complete. Well, what happens in either one of those scenarios? Inevitably, what I've seen is that things go off the rails a little bit. You may have a series of tasks that somebody wants to complete, and yes, they may complete those tasks, but somewhere along the way, they're going to get a little off the rail. They may do something a little funny. And if you're like me, for many years, it was you kind of turned a blind eye to it because you don't know what to make of it. You don't know how to validate it. If you're like me, you're kind of like, okay, they did everything, check the box, we move on. And I think the most exciting thing now is that as an industry, we're now getting a collection of tools that allow us to double check our assumptions and to validate what's going on there. So I think it's pretty exciting. All right. So ideas. The more that we've been doing this as a team and as a company, and the more I've been doing this as a designer, you realize that ideas, they just take time. And this has become more clear to me over the past 6 months or so as we begin to implement some new ideas into the product. And the way I like to think about it is that ideas, they need friends. And one idea on its own can only take you so far. So what this means is that you may, tinker on an idea, iterate. It's really fragile in this state. You're not sure what to do with it. You may share it with some friends, but eventually you may hit the wall and keep hitting it, and it's just kind of coasting along. So what do? You set it aside and you work on something else. And it takes patience. It takes a bit of humbleness to want to do that because it may be just this idea. But what I've begun to realize is that 6 months down the road, a year down the road, another idea might come up. And so what we need to be doing is actually looking at that new idea and figuring out, okay, this new idea actually complements that idea from a year ago. And so Bruce speaks about this kind of nicely. I think the analogy he uses is that an idea can be kind of coasting along for a while, and then only when another idea that hits it and complements it does it actually reach escape velocity. I think a lot of this kind of maybe you guys this rings true to you guys. All right. Lastly, this idea is something we call game film. This is a method that we've introduced within our company, and we've seen our own customers do this as well. The term game film is actually something we stole from the sports world. If you know anything about athletics, which I don't know much, but I know they do. Teams often sit in rooms ahead of the game or after the game's over, and they just review how things went. They put the game up on the big TV, and they say, how'd things go? And what are they looking for? They're looking for holes in their strategy. They're saying, how could we have done that better? How come we did not see that particular thing coming? Those kinds of things. So people, they're observing and they're learning. But what's key about it is that they're doing it together. They could be stuck in the locker room doing this on their own or at their home, but they're doing it together. And so you're seeing things, you're sharing ideas all from this shared experience. And so we made a little kit. We were building this thing called FullStory, and we said, you know what? Let's do this with our product. Our product has this very visual observation, nature to it, and so we'll have a big screen in our office, and we'll set up and just kind of pick 5 or 6 sessions at random, and we'll play them. And as a team, what we're doing is we're kind of watching and just kind of learning together. And one of the things that Bruce came up with was that you'll be watching these sessions, and something will happen. A user will do something off the rails, and we'll go, you're right, or don't click that, or click it. And those are we call those winces, those moments where you're like, oh my God, what happened? So we look for those moments and we record them. And over time, as the software gets more perfect, those things go away.
So just to clarify, Josh, you're watching FullStory using FullStory. That's very deep.
Yes, it's very deep. You are correct.
Cool.
It's very Inception-like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, that was an interesting thing when we were first, figuring out how to demo FullStory. Showing them FullStory within FullStory just didn't really work. So we had to build this other app, which called Fruit Shop, this fake, grocery shopping app. And that actually helped our demos go a little bit better.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's Game Film. Thanks.
We do have one question for design before we pass to Jacqueline. Seth Jenks asks, and by the way, put questions in Slack. I forgot to mention that. If you have any questions for these guys, how do you keep such beautiful, well-polished product with just 2 designers, Josh?
Thank you. One of the things that we do is FullStory is a very it's a very engineering-heavy product. There's a lot of code to it, and the best thing that we've done is actually commit code ourselves, and we're just talking like CSS, HTML, that kind of stuff. So we work with the engineering team. It's very rarely a waterfall process. We work with them early, all those kinds of things. Yeah.
Actually, I got to brag on microphone. Blog post that actually was getting some traffic. If you're interested in hearing more about that in particular, it's called Involving Engineers in the Design Process.
Engaging engineering and design. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was going around last week.
Yeah. It's a really good one. It goes into that arc in a lot of depth.
Cool. Thanks.
All right, am I on? Yes? I'm Jacqueline. I'm in the hugging department at FullStory, so I'm actually a hugger, which is a fun thing to say and put on my business card and walk around and talk about. So I'm going to explain that a little bit, but the way that it applies here is that there's a lot of product management to it. But when I started, it was this very loose concept. I sat in a room with Bruce and the other founder, and we were like, well, we need this thing. We need something that is customer facing, right? So let's do that. And then they're like, but really, we don't just want it to be customer service or account management. Like, we want whoever's talking to the customers to take that data and help it to inform the product moving forward. So it's pretty loose definition of what I signed up for, but it's been a fun year figuring out what it means and how we can use it to kind of corral ideas, the great ideas that we have, and influence our why from day to day. So different audiences, when I talk about being a hugger, have a different perception, but hopefully you guys will think that sounds a little bit like product management. Let's see. All right, you'd be right. Looks like I lost a circle there, but basically, if you had to map it out, it might look something like this. And when you see that there's a support component and an account management component, those two pieces are saying, I talk to the customers. So we don't actually have a support team. I'm not the support team. I do answer tickets when it's my support day, but Bruce and Josh answer tickets when it's their support day. So really, the support function is not so much to be a support agent, but to look at the types of questions that we're getting and say, what does this say about our product? Why does everybody keep asking that? Maybe this isn't going so well. And then, of course, with FullStory, the nice thing is I can go watch and say, oh yeah, it's not going well, and hey, Josh, let's get in a room and figure out how could we do this a little bit better. Then the account management side, that's the side where I'm engaging customers, I'm talking to them on the phone, I'm asking them questions, and really listening a lot, trying to get feedback and listen. And then the product management piece, that's where instead of taking all of that information that I'm receiving from customers and just passing it off to some other department and saying, please, hopefully you'll do something with this. It's also my job, my responsibility to figure out, how to tie it all up with a nice bow for the product team and make sure that we move forward on the right things at the right times.
Can I ask you one thing before we proceed? And this is a little unusual, I think, for a lot of us in SaaS. We're not used to hearing that account management and product are essentially the same thing. Yeah. So I guess I have two questions. One is how did you arrive? Is that a strategy? Is that something you said, we're going to do this? Because most SaaS doesn't. I mean, especially enterprise, you've got clear division between the two.
Yeah, I think, account management is a tough term to put up there because I wouldn't say that I'm not actively courting, 40 customers and making sure that I'm growing them. But it was the strategy was to say, let's make sure that the people who are helping to inform the product strategy are also talking to customers. And so when you think about the title of hugging, there's a lot of humility in it, right? So we're trying to hire humble people who are okay with putting hugger on their title, on their business card. And then what goes along with that is, just having the term hugger in your head all the time, it really informs your days, right? It reminds you, like, oh, I should probably be talking to customers. And that's one thing I think, with product management, that it's easy to say, oh, maybe I could bump that meeting, or maybe I don't really have time for that today. But since my title is hugger, it sounds pretty bad if I'm like, I haven't really talked to a customer in a couple months. That's bad. That would be really bad. So I think that was the strategy.
So the second part of my question is scalability.
Yeah.
What do you do when you grow?
That's a great question. I'm going to talk a little bit about some things that we're trying to put in place. Obviously, still iterating on it and figuring it out. But eventually we might need enterprise account managers, and hopefully I won't be one of them. All right, so like Josh mentioned, we've got a lot of great ideas. We have no shortage of great ideas. They come from internally all the time. We sit around, drink coffee, have great ideas, and they come from customers. And those are all great. And just to be really clear, my job is not to ram through all of the things that our customers ask for all the time. We want to do things strategically. And so my job is to think, okay, well, if we have all these great ideas, and we kind of want to go two directions, right? We have these competing things that are happening. We've got perfection, and as the customer advocate, as somebody who's talking to customers, like, I want things to be perfect, so can we just tweak this? Can we make this a little bit better? We've got a lot of complaints here. But then we've also got cool new stuff. We want to grow. We want to ship things. We want people to love our product and ask for more. And so we kind of find that we need to go up and to the right, because that's what every good graph does. And so where we feel like our why that Bruce talked about, a more perfect online experience, that's where it sits. It's sort of finding that sweet spot of doing things that help perfection and drive cool new stuff. And so whatever ideas we come up with, we want them to fall into that little green place, right? That's the sweet spot. So we've got, to answer your question a little bit, and then we can take more questions on this if you want them, but we've come up, we've done some things that we failed at, and we've iterated on some concepts, and the things that I wanted to touch on today were these three ideas, which are themes, not teams. So we do have teams, and we've got a design team, we have a hugging team, we have a product team, but we really try very hard to work cross-functionally, and I think that's a theme in the industry. We're all trying it in different ways, and themes are something that we've come up with where it's basically a thematic goal for the product, and you've got a cross-functional group of people who raised their hand and said, I'm interested in moving that theme forward, and that means they commit to meeting regularly and talking about things. The cross-functional nature of that, really, really important, because all these great ideas that need to find their besties, right? Ideas need friends. They can exist in that space together. And then if you have a hugger in the mix, they can say, oh, customers are saying this. And then all those ideas can sort of marinate nicely. And then you've got a theme to say, okay, well, that would actually help our theme move forward. And now you've got a nice mix of ideas that sort of had a nice space for those to grow together.
Could you give an example of a theme, just to
Yeah,
be
so
concrete about it?
well, you saw the product. So search experience is one of our themes. Improving search. But then we also have a concept of like magic and insights. A lot of what we want to pop up in the product, like rage clicks, that we kind of feel is a little bit magical. So what are some other things that we could do that would be magical? Does that make sense? Is that a good example? All right. So the next thing is to bionically prioritize. So bionics are something that we talk about a lot. It's one of our watchwords. And if you think of, in a movie, what is a bionic person? It's a human made better by machines. And that's how we feel. We want to keep the human touch in everything that we do. We don't just want you to feel like you're working with a piece of software, a bunch of faceless men who you don't know who they are. So we want to bionically do things, but with a human touch. And the bionic prioritization really means that we thought really, really hard. The humans sat in a room and thought really, really hard about what's important for each new idea? What are some of the different angles you can look at that idea? How does this impact customers? How does this impact our why? How does this create a more perfect online experience? Is something completely broken, or is it just a nice new feature that you could have? Think about that really, really hard, quadrant it out. And then what we ended up with, and it might be different for you, but is a very simple scorecard. And the scorecard is, when I say simple, I mean yes-no questions. Things that no matter who answered would answer it the same way. There's no subjective 1 through 10, grayscale. It answers all the questions to get you back to the place that you wanted to be, and allows you, remember our ideas from earlier, once you've scored them, you can now say, okay, where does it really fit? Where does it map onto our strategy? Is it in our sweet spot, or is it kind of way ahead in the future, and maybe we don't need to do that right now? And then prove-its. I'll go through this quickly, but prove-its are a fun concept, and not everything always fits into this perfect process that you mapped out, or your roadmap, or your journey. And so prove-it is a way to say, I think I've got a great idea. I think we should do it now. And anybody at the company, they're welcome to schedule a prove-it with key stakeholders and say, I want to prove that we should do this thing. And the activation energy required to do that often means like, oh, you know what, I don't actually feel that passionate about it. It's like the 0 to 10 scale we saw earlier. I'm kind of a 2, never mind. But there's also, we use this concept too when engineers and designers are delivering things and we say, okay, this is ready to go to the customer. I'm like, okay, prove it. And we sit in a room together and they show me how the customer can use it, and we watch FullStory sessions on it, and we say, yeah, actually that looks really great, let's ship it. And so those are 3 ways that we have found to kind of product manage in our world.
And I want to comment that I think this is awesome. I don't think I've seen it visualized like this before. Is this something that you guys kind of came to a realization of, or?
Yeah, this has been something we've kind of been talking about recently. I drew this on the plane on the way out, I'll be honest. But it's something that I'm pitching in a few weeks at a meeting that we've got scheduled, and I like the concept. It allows you to take all of your ideas and say, okay, it's not a roadmap. It's not something that we said we were going to do 6 months ago. Maybe we don't need to do it now. But it's the same framework for the future.
But it would help product managers, especially with key stakeholders and others, to find more balance.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So if everybody in the organization has the same mental model, then you should easily be able to place your ideas on it and say, why they fit, where they fit.
Yeah.
To go meta to that topic just for a second, the reason I think we tend to create artifacts like this is because among other things, we don't have managers really. So in a situation where you have to make progress and there's nobody just dictating what's going to happen, how do you proceed? And our answer to that is, like we have the watchword bionics, we have a watchword clarity. And so we really go the extra mile to make sure that everybody's really clear about what they mean when they talk about something. So it tends to make you do things like invent these charts so that you could be crystal clear about what you mean when you're advocating something. And if you're against it, you could say, I'm against it, not that I don't like it, it's just that it's out here on the chart, and I think right now we should be focusing on here in the chart. And that sort of thing has been surprisingly useful as a cultural concept, just clarity for everything.
So that's all we had prepared.
Oh, cool. Well, we got lots of questions for you. The first one is, and I had the same one. Well, I guess it's a 2-part. In fact, a person here, I won't mention who, he'd be embarrassed. But he hates the word culture. And I know you used it, so I want to push you on it. Oh, he's raising his hand. I want to push you on that a little bit. And what do you mean by culture? Can you define it a little bit better? And also, along with that, this is the question from the audience. You started off with the culture effect on the project. How did culture affect your product, and did you make any changes to your culture?
Can I ask why I didn't see who that was that doesn't just to understand with a basis for the objection, to make sure we're using the same word the same way. Right.
He's saying we use it a lot to cover a lot of things.
Right.
But everyone has
okay,
their
yeah,
own
I understand. It's
thing.
basically just, he's saying it just means a lot of different things to a lot of people. It just becomes this generic kind of feel-good term. I worry actually that empathy is going to follow that same path. And that sucks because, when used very precisely, it can mean something powerful and important. That's actually why our culture has this notion of clarity. And we'll actually spend 15 minutes saying, now, when you say that word, exactly what do you mean by that? We talked about what a switchback is for about 20 minutes yesterday. Because I was like,
Our
is
Uber
it
driver was
the
like, "What are you
trail?
talking
Is it the
about?"
whole trail? Or is it just the one curve? Turns out it's both. We looked it up. It means both things, so that's confusing. But anyway, well, I think what I mean by culture is that you can fundamentally, I think, organize a company in two different ways. One is a chain of authority, which is traditionally how it's done. It's like, this person knows everything. These other people don't know as much, but they'll do what that person says, and they have a few ideas of their own. Then they tell the other people who don't know shit, they tell them what to do day to day. And I just think that's stupid. I mean, it's a great recipe for getting people who like to be told what to do and don't have ideas of their own, and that's not a place I want to work. So the alternative to that is to try to create systems that are self-perpetuating, self-reinforcing. So I would describe it as like being clear about what your dogma is. That doesn't mean your dogma is right, but it's useful to state it so that you can see what the implications are. And then if you end up in a place you're not liking, change your dogma. You'll start to veer in a slightly different direction. So that's what we mean by culture. And like our watchwords is 3 simple words: empathy, clarity, bionics. Now you might say that's fluff or something like that, but we use those concepts like almost every day. And look, they've already come up a bunch of times just in this talk alone. So.
Very cool. I want to talk a little bit more about the tool itself and about how I am interested from the perspective of a customer. Who is using it to its max capacity? What are the behaviors of product managers and UXers who are getting the most benefit out of the insights you can provide?
That's an interesting question. I think that product managers are one of our biggest supporting audiences, and UX design. They're the ones who find us, think it's pretty, enjoy using it, and really get it. But I think the limitation there is that you have to fit it into your workflow every day or once a week or something like that. Game film is a concept really that we came up with for that purpose in a lot of ways, to say, how do you teach this thing, this habit of going and watching sessions. We still do it at the office. We can talk about a concept for a minute and then say, let's just look that up in FullStory. And so it just becomes part of your language and your understanding of users, and just another thing in your tool belt that you can use. But I think too, once it is in the company, in those audiences, what happens a lot is support agents find it, and that at that point, things blow up because you've got to have every single session, and they're all really important. And the moment a user writes in and says, "Oh, this didn't work," now you can be like, "Okay, let me watch it. I see what happened. We're sorry. We're fixing it. We're making it better." And then your customers love that because it's this really great experience for them. And then you can also now say, "Okay, well, I wonder if that's happening for other people," and go do a quick search and make things better.
So do you find that with those two personas that's competing for your trajectory and your roadmap? I'm talking specifically about product versus accounts or support.
I don't think they're competing. I think our goal and the why and the how was we want all the teams at a company to need and want FullStory because they can all use it. I feel like
we kind of want it to be somewhat less of a specialist's tool, and we can talk in those terms. Like, we could make it more powerful in this way, but it might be a little bit off-putting to somebody else who is not an expert. Analytics tools can get to be this way. Like, there's like 3 people in your company that would even want to touch it, and it seems off-putting to everybody else. So we just believe that the best customer experience and the best product come from cross-functional unity. You don't want like marketing to describe it one way, sales has a different paradigm in their mind, and designers and engineers are not on the same page. So, hopefully FullStory can be the unifying force. Actually, that also, by the way, is why we don't talk in terms of long-term strategy and long-term roadmaps anyway.
And that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
What do you see in the future?
we kind of, I mean, honestly, you might be astonished to hear this, but we'll just say, like, okay, how are we doing with support? Are support people benefiting? How are we doing with PMs? No? Okay, well, we've got a backlog of like 50 awesome ideas that we could enhance to make FullStory better for product management teams. Let's go do some of those this cycle, and then we'll switch and do some more next cycle.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I think when it comes to our kind of penetration into different corporations and so forth, it was really interesting. 2 years ago, just a little over 2 years ago, we kind of had our very first kind of minimum viable product. People were buying, and that was the thing. What was interesting about it is we didn't have search, and so it was, and so our initial audience was these kind of customer service people that worked with customers answering tickets. And so what that meant for them is they would go into their ticket system like Zendesk or something, and they would be able to look at what the problem was the customer had and then watch the session. That was the initial kind of hook. And so that was a very key use case for us. I think it's kind of funny in hindsight, we actually included a search box in the UI just because we felt, even though it didn't do anything, you could click into it, but it did nothing. And in hindsight,
how many rage clicks did
exactly. And we just felt so bad. We're just giving them a big bag of sessions to look at. We want to give them a glimpse of something in the future. But nowadays, we actually kind of tend to start with product teams and then work our way out from there. So I think we're doing our job well when we see the walls between product teams, development, sales, marketing. When those walls start to come down by using our product, we think that's pretty exciting.
Actually, rage clicks did get invented that way. It was no grand strategy, no genius, product thinker or something like that. It was like we were doing game film, and on our homepage we had a picture of FullStory with the play buttons, and we would watch, and people would see a play button and click it. It was just a static image, though. It was a picture of what FullStory looked like. But in game film, we saw people are just like pounding these play buttons, so they're thinking that the website's broken. And they're like, oh, well, we could detect that pattern of people just slamming on those things. So it's another example of just like you figure it out as you go along, Have you ever heard that expression, jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down? Yeah. It's sort of what we've done.
And you survived.
So far.
The last question, because we're out of time, but Jacqueline, I like this one. And I was interested in this too when we first talked, but what is your background as a hugger? What brought you there? Is it product management, account executive? How did you find your way there?
That's a great question. I came from a very different industry. It was freight forwarding. I'm so happy to not be in freight forwarding anymore. It's kind of the worst. And if anybody else does it out there, there's hope. There's other things. But while I was at this company, it was actually a really, really great company. Lots of good culture and stuff like that. And so I stayed for a long time. But I was an account manager. So I started as like a brokerage entry agent, and then I became an account manager. And account management there was more about the relationship side. So it was accounts that we had already sold. And it was really growing and building the relationship. You had a book of business that you tried to develop them into more products, but also you were trying to strategically understand, what do they do, and how could our products, help them with that. And then after I was an account manager, I became a product manager. And product manager in that industry was a little bit different, but my product was ocean export. And so, I was responsible for making sure that I had innovative ocean export solutions, which nothing in that industry has been innovative for a really long time. But, that was a part, I had my own P&L and I ran that. And so when I met these guys, it was really exciting because it was like, yeah, I can do account stuff and I can do product stuff and let's do it together. So that was just a great opportunity for me.
Well, yeah, and I was telling these guys earlier that, when we had our first call with you, Jacqueline, and she was navigating us through the DOM and showing us, I was like, wow, that's really impressive. I've never had an account manager do that ever, and especially with your background, that's really impressive. So, well, these guys have been awesome. You guys have a lot of questions still that we didn't get to, so your work's cut out for you after. I'd encourage you to go back into Slack and answer those. But we really appreciate you coming out and all of your insights. So, thanks, guys.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.